podcast. This is your host, Nathan Grubel. Joining me, as always, is my producer, Kevin Black. Kevin, we have a full show today. Dare we call this a megapod? Because we have not only the Overstated family back with us, and Brett and Jacob. Steve couldn't make it tonight, but I promise we're going to get him on one of these podcasts. But we also have the introduction of my new co-host moving forward, Cole Miller. Cole, introduce yourself to the audience, my friend.
Once again, thanks, Nate. It's great to be here. Great to finally be doing this with you. I'm excited to be doing this with the Overstated pod. It's really an awesome experience, my first time around. I'm really excited to get going, so let's just do it.
Absolutely. Let's get into it. Brett, Jacob, you guys ready to hammer out some NBA?
Oh, you know it, man.
Absolutely.
So for everyone listening, I wanted to do an NBA preview pod because we are recording this on Friday the 11th. So there is preseason basketball going on tonight that I'm sure everyone in this discussion is also going to be watching as soon as we're done. We're recording this about 5:30 Eastern time. By the time we wrap up, we're likely going to be seeing the Magic take on the Hawks. So I'm excited for that one. I know pretty much everybody in here is as well, because we want to see the debut of Cole Anthony and how many minutes he gets and what he can do. So we're going to try to speed through this preview here and give you guys a nice rundown of essentially the entire picture for what we expect to see during this upcoming NBA season. So what I wanted to do, I have 30 teams here, obviously, 30 questions. We're going to hammer out each question one by one for each team, obviously. We're going to make our way through the East. We're going to make our way through the West. Basically, how I'm going to do this is just going to be open discussion. So once I ask the question, anyone who wants to jump in with an answer, please do. And we're going to go from there as far as having open talk, open dialogue about everything we have here. And I think this is going to give us a good picture for the season. So with that being said, are we ready, boys?
Let's do it.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So actually, going against what I just said, Brett, you're gonna be the first target here with this question, because I know you're the Celtics guy on the podcast here. So, Brett, how much can the Celtics rely on Kemba Walker to be healthy? And if he's not, who is the lead guard the rest of the team has to adjust to? Is it Smart kind of playing like a bigger lineup, or can they trust Jeff Teague to step in right away and definitely win the respect of the rest of his teammates and kind of command things from that lead guard spot?
Yeah, I think at this point, it's really hard to trust Kemba's ability to stay healthy. He's on the wrong side of 30 now, and that knee issue just doesn't seem to be going away. So it'll be nice if he can get back sometime soon and be at full strength, but I don't think you can count on that. And I think the guy is going to be Teague. I think that Teague could still be a starting level NBA point guard. He's not super old. He was really good a few years ago. And as a Celtics fan, I'm glad they brought him in, because I think at the very least, he's a guy that can steer the ship in Kemba's absence. And of course, we'll see Marcus playing some point guard. We might see Carson Edwards step up into a larger role. But I think Jeff Teague is going to be the guy. He's going to be the point guard. I think he's best suited for that role. And I'm glad that Boston has him, because, he won't hurt you when he's out there. He's solid. He's experienced. And Boston has some other, ball handlers in Jalen and Jason that can really, do a lot with the ball. So, not too much will be asked of him. He's just a steady hand. And I think that's what they need at this point to, at least stay above water.
Yeah, that's a good point that you brought up, because I think in a way, Jeff Teague's kind of been given like a raw deal with how he's been bounced around here a little bit. I didn't really think he was given too much of a chance to succeed in Minnesota, given the personnel he had around him. But even being a little bit on the older side, as you said, Brett, he's still young enough. And even if you want to run some more offense through some of those other guys, whether it be Smart, Tatum, Brown, Jeff Teague is a good enough spot-up shooter to, at the very least, spread the court for you. Obviously, he's a smart decision maker on the floor. He's a veteran, and he's going to compete defensively, even if he's not like any kind of lockdown defender at that spot. What do you think about Jeff Teague potentially having to step up into a bigger role for the Celtics right away, Jacob?
I think it's what you really have to do, because I don't think you can rely on Marcus Smart as much. Not that he's not a good playmaker, but I would rather have someone like Jeff Teague playing the point. One thing I'm more interested in regarding that is how is that going to affect how Brad Stevens sets up, because coming into Boston, his system has really pushed the scoring point guards to the forefront of the offense. You
Hmm.
think, Isaiah, Kyrie, Kemba. I think with Kemba, he began to change the system with the amount of wing scoring he had. Kemba maybe took more of a back seat than Kyrie and Isaiah did before him. But now you've got Jeff Teague. That's a whole different style of point guard. And that's something I think I'm interested to see how Brad Stevens adapts his system and whether he tries to go for a more you to kind of let everyone eat, basically. Are you going to have Tatum as the secondary but also shares the duties? Is he good enough for that yet? Is Brown good enough for that yet? I'm not sure, and I'm interested more to see how Brad Stevens adapts to it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Cole. Any other thoughts on Boston?
Yeah, I just want to throw out that Kemba's got Jeff by 2 years, so I'm not sure if I totally buy into that part of it just yet. I think we're going to see Jeff slowly work his way in as a starter, maybe a little bit faster than I anticipate, just based on there's not a lot of camp, there's not a lot of familiarity there. I think if you're a Celtics fan, you're hoping Jeff Teague gets back to the way he was a couple years ago, but he's looked disinterested a lot the last 2 years, I will say, from what I've seen. I think there's going to be a lot of Smart and Teague on the court at times together, just because Smart can literally defend 1 through 4, even if you don't really think he should be defending 4s, he somehow figures out a way to do it. I think the guy that to keep an eye on that might really start poking his head into the rotation just because he's got a knack for doing it, and he works hard and he won't go away, is Tremont Waters. I think he makes an impact before Carson Edwards. He was obviously the G League Player of the Year last year. Obviously, I don't think he is Chris Paul, but he's got that type of dog in him and that type of old school point guard mentality. So I'm interested to see what Waters does with the rotation this year.
Well, the Celtics can't stop drafting small point guards.
No,
So,
they can't do that either. I don't. Yeah, I mean, at some point, one of them's got to break through. I actually really like Waters. I really like Pritchard. I don't think Pritchard's going to see the court a lot this year, though. But
Waters was a big guy on our old scouting staff, Cole. For anyone who didn't really get a backstory as to how Cole and I actually met, we used to work for a private scouting firm together. So back in that heyday, when Cole and I were on the staff, Waters was a staff favorite. Definitely among enough of the staff. So I'm very intrigued to see if Cole's point can come true and Waters actually breaks through and starts earning good minutes for Boston. Moving on to the Brooklyn Nets. My question for the Brooklyn Nets is, do they actually have enough depth to compete for a title? And let me kind of explain what I mean by that. So obviously you have the two established stars in Kyrie and KD. You have Karis LeVert, who really took what I would consider to be a monstrous leap last year in terms of when he was showing high level production and in what kind of moments and what kind of games. Especially in the bubble. I mean, I know he had to do a lot for the Nets because like nobody was there on that roster who's should have been. Everyone was either hurt or coming back from injury, or in Spencer Dinwiddie's case, he was still recovering from COVID. So he kind of had to step up. But you have those kind of three guys, but Spencer Dinwiddie hasn't really played in a ton of big spots. Obviously, Landry Shamet, Bruce Brown are still relatively young. Luau Cabarro is obviously not very battle tested in terms of like bigger games and bigger spots. Same can pretty much be said for Jared Allen. Tyler Johnson has been around the block a little bit, so he might be able to still pick up some minutes with this team. Jeff Green, we kind of know that Jeff Green's kind of very hit or miss. And I'm not really sure I know what exactly we're going to get out of DeAndre Jordan this year either. So as much as I want to be high on the Nets and think that they can obviously compete for a title and be able to get to the finals out of the East, I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on the quality of their depth. So if anyone wants to kind of jump in here and maybe tell me why I'm right, tell me why I'm wrong, that's just kind of my take on the Nets.
yeah, I pretty much agree. I mean, you have Kyrie and KD, and then I think you're probably keeping Joe Harris around for the long haul. But after that, it's really kind of a hodgepodge of guys. I like Karooks and Bruce Brown, but I think they're smaller role players on that team in the long run. So I don't think they're a title contender this year, and I think that's realistic because KD's coming off an Achilles tear. I don't really think anybody should be considering them true title contenders this year. They need a year to figure it out beyond those 3 or 4 players.
Yeah, I think, if they fall short of winning a title or making the finals or even making the conference finals or whatever, I don't think it's going to be because of a lack of depth. I mean, there's some concerns there. I think their guard depth is great. When you talk about Kyrie and LeVert, and then having Dinwiddie, Shamet, and Bruce Brown off the bench, like that's not a bad guard rotation at all. It gets a little thin up front. When you talk about if Durant needs to miss time or Harris goes down, then you're down to Taurean Prince, Green, and Karoots and TLC, like you said. And then, I think I would say they have good center depth. They have 2 starting caliber centers in DJ and Jared Allen. So I'm not so much worried about their depth. I think if they fall short, it's going to be an issue of chemistry or, a pretty catastrophic injury like Kyrie or KD missing serious time. But most likely, yeah, this is their first year together. There's probably going to be some chemistry issues. It wouldn't surprise me if they're a top maybe 4, maybe even 3 team in the East, but there's a couple of teams I like better than them in that conference. But I'm not as worried about their depth as some other potential issues.
Yeah, when I read this question, I thought it's more that this question is predicated on how good are Kyrie and KD, because depending on how good they are, the depth becomes less important. If they are very good still, which is questionable, but depending on how you view KD coming off his Achilles tear, depending on how you view Kyrie's health in general, I do think they have the depth. Like Brett said, they have a great guard rotation. Those are 4 guards who could all get minutes on playoff teams. They have Joe Harris, Taurean Prince, LeVert. Like Brett said, they have 2 starting caliber centers. And I went through their roster. I thought about 9 guys that I could see, depending on situation and matchup, that could get real minutes in a playoff series. And that's, I think, more than most of the top. Like, that's a lot more than the Lakers have. I think it's just we know with the Lakers what we're getting out of LeBron and AD, and we don't know that about Durant and Kyrie, and that's where the issue lies, I think.
What do you guys think about Kevin Durant coming out and saying that the plan is for him to definitely see some minutes at the center spot? See, I'm not a big fan of that idea, only because he is coming off a very serious injury. So if you put him at the center spot, you're definitely asking him to be in the middle of everything down low. Obviously trying to box out, aggressively go for rebounds, protect the paint. I'm not sure how much I want him down low, potentially hunting for and or being exposed to more contact than just having him purely kind of like playing more out in the wing, spreading the floor. I think that's kind of where the Nets should look to have him, especially like starting the year. What do you, am I overblowing that? What do you guys think about that? I thought that was a very interesting nugget.
I didn't hear that, but I actually don't see him really playing the 5. Like, I don't really, maybe very situationally, if they really want to go small, maybe, but I don't think that's going to be very much of his role. I mean, I just, when you have DJ and Jared Allen, and then Nicholas Claxton too, who I like a lot, is out with tendinopathy, I believe, in his knee, but he'll be back at some point too. And I think he could get some minutes at center as well. So I don't know how much there is to that, to KD saying that. If I think that would just be like a experimental lineup at best.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it because I think that at least it limits KD's need to be mobile on the floor. If they're running like drop coverage, he can just drop into the paint on a pick and roll, and there's not that many bruisers. Obviously, he wouldn't be playing the 5 if like Embiid was out there, but if they're going up against a smaller lineup,
It's fair
then
point.
I don't see why they wouldn't try to limit his mobility by playing him at the 5 for a bit. And obviously, on the offensive end, having someone like KD at the 5 is destructive if it works out for you. So I don't I think it will see some minutes this season. I don't see why it wouldn't in particular situations, not against the Embiids or the Giannis's. You would want a bigger body, but yeah, it's against teams that maybe don't have those physical specimens. I think you'll get some minutes.
Fair enough. I agree with all the points made. Like I said, I'm just trying to limit as much contact that he's potentially bracing for and taking as much as possible. And maybe to Jacob's point, it's an incredibly situational lineup. So we'll have to wait and see how that one plays out and how many minutes he actually gets at the center spot. But yeah, that certainly has all the destructive potential in the world offensively. If he's spreading the floor at the 5 spot and you have a 3-point shooter like him spreading the court for somebody like Kyrie to better get in the lane and do more damage. So that's definitely something I'll be watching with, and that's for sure. Moving on to the other team in New York, the Knicks. My question about the Knicks is one that's certainly come up in our Overstated group, especially recently, has to do with Kevin Knox. So can Kevin Knox take a leap and become a legitimate NBA starter to balance out the lineup, or will the Knicks have to get creative starting someone like Bullock on the wing to fill in more shooting? Cole, I actually want to pivot to you on this one because you and I have certainly had conversations about Knox in the past. Is he pretty much a prospect that might potentially be dead in the water, or is there still enough hope there? Because I actually think there is hope for Kevin Knox, given how young he was coming into the draft. He was the youngest player in that draft class. I still have Kevin Knox stock that I'm going to hold on to.
Yeah, I don't think you can completely sell yet on Kevin. I don't think the lofty ceiling that a lot of people thought was there when he came out of college is still there. I think it's more of he's just a nice starter, potentially a good shooter, and a guy that can spread the floor, but not really somebody who's going to be handling the ball a great deal like some of these other wings have come out and done. In the draft classes since his, like Jalen and Jason Tatum, I'm thinking of in that regard specifically. But no, I think Thibodeau is going to ride him real hard, for better or worse, and we're going to see what Kevin Knox has at the NBA level this year. He's not going to get jerked around like he did last year. But again, I just think he's a nice starter at this point. I think that's his potential.
Yeah,
definitely.
Would you're out on Knox?
I'm definitely. I don't really see. I mean, he's put in a very bad situation, I think, in New York, because I think his optimal position is probably playing the 4 as a hyper athletic 4, and yeah, like he can't really shoot. Like all his indicate, he shoots basically 33% from everywhere outside the paint. He's shooting at the rim. I think it's dampened a bit by how New York was set up last year, but his shooting at the rim is dreadful for someone his size. Yeah, I do not see Knox really. I don't see him sticking, to be honest, in the NBA going forward. I think part of it is just going to New York and having that dreadful situation. And maybe, he goes to the Spurs, it's a whole different story. He goes to Boston, it's a whole different story. That's not what happened. And I think he's just been unlucky. I don't think he's going to stick.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the power forward thing because I could see that too, especially on this team. I've never been a fan of the Randall and Mitchell Robinson fit together. Randall just doesn't shoot it well enough, and I think you need somebody at the 4 who can stretch it a little bit alongside Robinson, and maybe Knox could be that. I think he's a better shooter than his numbers would have you believe.
I agree.
I don't have a problem with his shot. I actually think he's got a pretty nice looking shot, and when he takes good shots, he knocks them down. So I think he's a better shooter than his numbers would lead you to believe. And I also think he has some really nice defensive moments in terms of blocking shots. He's actually a really good rim protector. I believe he was second on the Knicks behind Mitchell Robinson in block percentage last year, maybe third, but it was very respectable in that regard. And he's had a weird career trajectory so far, and a lot of that was just coaching decisions. Like as a rookie, he played, I think, almost 30 minutes a game, and was somewhat productive, albeit not efficient at all, but at least he was getting an opportunity. And then in his second year to just bench him, it didn't make a lot of sense for a team that had no chance of making the playoffs. Why not develop him a little more, give him some more time on the court? I never liked that. So I think having a new coach there, in the report, I think the wording was that Tibbs has been in his ear all summer, is what I read, and they are still prioritizing him. So I expect him to start. To answer your question, I see the argument for Bullock having some more shooting out there, but again, I think Knox is a better shooter than a lot of people realize. It's just that their backcourt is none of those guys are shooters, whether it's Elfrid Payton or Austin Rivers or Frank Ntilikina or Dennis Smith or RJ Barrett, even at this point, like none of those guys can shoot. So they need more shooting. So I see the argument for putting Bullock out there, but I think Knox might be able to give you some shooting in year 3. That was something else I read, is that he has improved his shot even more. So I'm excited to see what he looks like. And, I think Tibbs believes in him, and that's important. That's half the battle sometimes.
Yeah, I sure hope so, because I think Kevin Knox has been given one of the rawest deals in the NBA of anybody that I can think of in recent memory, to be perfectly honest with you. Coming out of Kentucky, he was viewed as a potential shot creating wing, which, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, how many opportunities has he really had to experiment on the court in real NBA games, kind of handle the ball a little bit, be given that kind of responsibility and enough freedom to at least try to do a lot of those things. He's primarily been used as pretty much nothing but a spot up shooter, and then whatever you get on defense is gravy. But if I'm Kevin Knox, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, why haven't I been given the opportunity to experiment a little more? What true amazing ball handlers and point guards have I really gotten the chance to play alongside in my few years here in New York? Obviously, RJ Barrett has had growing pains. We know that Knicks haven't had a point guard in a long time period. So, like, if I'm Kevin Knox, I'm kind of sitting there like, why haven't I been given a little more freedom? Why haven't I been given more of an opportunity to kind of go out in a real game, not just a practice setting, and prove that, hey, maybe I can bring more to this team that I've been given credit for and given the opportunity for since I've gotten here. So I'm also very intrigued to see what happens with Kevin Knox. I hope he's given more of an opportunity to go out and do a little more things on offense than just stand in the quarter and spread the floor for a bunch of ball handlers that, quite frankly, other than RJ, I'm still really not a big Elfrid Payton guy at this point. I'm not really a fan of their point guard rotation, period. So I'm more inclined to say yes, that I think he can take a leap as long as he's given the opportunity. And Brett, you brought up the point where the whole question originated from, was that Tibbs does have Knox in mind for a bigger role. So what we can only hope, right? We can only hope that he gets his chance. So
I mean, he just turned 21, right?
exactly.
But
He was the youngest player coming in, and he was obviously going to have growing pains. Right?
He's extremely young. I think we can all agree that this is a really big year, if not make or break for him. We really need to see something from him this season.
Yeah.
How many of these Kentucky guys haven't had growing pains coming out of Kentucky at this point, right? Like, how many have truly been special enough to come in right away and just like click? It's been what? It's been like John Wall, Boogie Cousins, even in that same class, like Bledsoe didn't immediately click in the NBA right away. He still had to get enough of a role to shine in Phoenix. Phoenix was really like his big bright spot. Kind of like the end of his Clippers tenure, but really like when he got to Phoenix, that's when he put everybody on notice. Like, oh my God, like why hasn't he gotten a bigger role up to this point, right? So
I mean, Jamal Murray, Booker,
AD.
I mean, AD kind of was an MVP candidate year 3, so, but that's AD. That's kind of the exception to any rule.
Fox.
Right. But even so, like, we're talking about guys that are blossoming like in year 3 and year 4. So that's kind of what Kevin's coming into, and that's why I still see I still see a light at the end of the tunnel for him moving forward. And speaking on those Kentucky guys, it's going to be a conversation we're going to have in this draft season as well, with guys like Brandon Boston struggling out of the gate for Kentucky. Terrence Clark has had some moments. I think he's probably like the best prospect on that team right now. Isaiah Jackson struggled offensively out of the gate. So these are another Calipari class that's probably going to struggle their first few years in the NBA, are going to have to figure some things out. So who knows? But moving on to the hometown, at least for Cole and I, the hometown Philadelphia 76ers. My question, I'm sure I'm going to get rebuttal on this one. I already know it's probably coming from Cole, but can Ben Simmons win the MVP award this season?
I'll defer.
Well,
you're going to defer? I thought I was getting the crap from you first.
We got this question in our a couple episodes ago, and we did a mailbag. Somebody was asking for like a dark horse MVP candidate, and Ben Simmons was my pick. And I said I think he could be, in the top, a dark horse, like in the top 5 for MVP voting. So look, I expect big things from the Sixers. I have them right at the top. in the East. And if Ben Simmons is their clear-cut best player, and if he takes a leap, and if he benefits from having some additional shooting around him, namely Seth Curry, to a lesser degree, maybe Shake Milton, and maybe, we'll see what Korkmaz can do. But look, man, I think if he improves enough and the Sixers are as good as I think they can be, I think he could be at least in the top 5. So I would say he can. I don't think it's likely, but I like him as like a dark horse pick.
See, I am gonna pivot because I've been thinking quite a lot about this kind of MVP discussion because we're going to be doing awards predictions leading into the season on the Overstated NBA show, and I actually stumbled. I'm not sure where he's going to end up, but I think Embiid has a real shot
Yes.
MVP. Yeah, I think he's going to be the kind of the focal point of this team. While Simmons, maybe I would prefer to build around Simmons in theory. I think when you actually get them on the floor, Embiid is a much more impactful player right now. When you think defensively, he might be the best defender in the league, kind of top 3 defender in the league. He's maybe the only guy who can efficiently score out the low post. I think he's going to be the one getting most of the attention for MVP because I do think Philly's going to end up very high. I think his counting stats are going to be amazing now that you've gotten some of these other scorers out of the team. I don't think Ben Simmons, with other big scorers in the team, without him kind of being the main guy, surrounded by a team of Danny Greens, I don't think he's ever going to put up the numbers to really get into that kind of discussion, no matter how impactful he is on defense or how good a playmaker he is, personally.
Yeah, I'm going to back you up there, Jacob. I think
That's
for
right.
this year and at least next year, it's got to be Embiid. Ben's definitely going to take a step forward with the better team surrounding him from a role standpoint with Seth and some of the other shooters there, and steps forward with Matisse and Shake, hopefully. But Doc's going to get the ball in Embiid's hands in better positions than Brett ever did. We're playing a shorter season this year, so I think Embiid's probably a good lock to play 65 to almost all of the games. I don't think he's going to miss more than 5 games this year if he doesn't have a random injury pop up. So I think that's going to be in his favor. Yeah, I think Embiid is just refreshed. I think he's ready to go, and I think we're going to see a better version of him than we saw 2 years ago. And that was an MVP candidate for a good part of the year when they went on that winning streak. So I think it's Embiid this year for the Sixers, and maybe next year. Down the road, I could see Ben edging him out with some top 5 votes.
So the main reason why, and that's fine if you two have banded together. I suppose Brett and I are gonna make our own small little team here to go against you guys. But the only reason why I'm gonna side with Ben Simmons and why I asked the question in the first place was, and Embiid's deficiencies. I see a lot more of a deficiency in Embiid's game in terms of what improvement he might bring to the court this year than I do with Ben. I think if Ben wants it. I think if Ben comes out and is aggressive right out of the gate, I think it could potentially be his award to lose as long as the team behind him actually performs to the way that we think they will. Because I really think the only thing that holds Ben back is his aggressiveness, wanting to get to the basket, wanting to put the ball in the hoop. There are so many times when you watch the Sixers, and I want to quite literally tear my hair out because I see Simmons have an open lane to the basket, whether it's in transition or whether it's in the half court, somebody sets a good screen for him to get downhill, and he just doesn't take the opportunity, right? He passes the ball away, not looking to score, and it drives me nuts. But at the same time, if Ben's really motivated and he wants to come out and hunt for more of those scoring opportunities more often, I mean, he's a bull in a china shop when he wants to get to the basket, right? Like when he actually wants to, there are a few people that are ultimately going to stop him from getting there and finishing. So I think he has a real chance to pop those scoring numbers right up, especially with more of a spread floor. And Embiid, here's my problem with Embiid. So I think everybody has seen him as this incredible back to the basket guy, this throwback big who you should be throwing the ball into him all the time, kind of let him do his thing down low. God, I know the numbers kind of reflect that too, but how many times does that man turn the ball over because he can't pass out of a double team, because his handle's a little shaky with his back to the basket? And I see so many turnovers. I see so many times when he tries to turn into like 3 guys and still try and finish the shot anyways, instead of trying to maybe do something else with the ball. So I think as much as we can say that Ben holds himself back, I see Embiid holding himself back as well, but he's been in the league long enough and he's been in enough moments that the things that he's missing from an IQ standpoint in terms of his vision and his processing of the game, I'm not sure if we're going to get that at a higher level, much like I thought we once were. And I don't know how you guys feel about any of that, but that's just kind of my Simmons versus Embiid take, which is why I've kind of always sided with Simmons, because I think at the end of the day, he's the smarter player. He's as talented, if not more talented, than Embiid. And I think it's really just about it. If Ben wants it, I think anything in the league is there for him to grab.
I think he has an easier path to the MVP than Embiid this coming season. Like, it's pretty simple. Like, if Philadelphia is the best team in the East, Ben Simmons averages a triple-double and plays first-team level defense, that might do it right there. You know what I mean? If he averages 18, 10, and 10 on the best team in the East and plays defense at that level, that's a pretty good argument right there. And I think with Embiid, I just have like this built-in like missed games thing in my head. Anytime I think about him, I'm like, well, he's going to miss a certain amount of games. And Cole brought up a great point about the shortened season, and maybe that will benefit him in that regard. But I have a hard time thinking that guy can stay healthy.
Yeah, but do you think anyone's going to think Simmons is, even if he averages like an 18, 10, and 10, like, and plays amazing defense, do you think voters are really going to pick him? Say Embiid puts up 30 and 13, or 30 and 12, or 29 and 12.
Well, the scoring numbers for Simmons have to go up. I mean, Cole made that point to me off the air that, like, is there really going to be an MVP who only scores like 19 points a game? Like, yeah, when Brett and I are talking about that, we're anticipating that Ben is going to be more aggressive out of the gate, and the scoring numbers do shoot up, because if those scoring numbers do shoot up, the efficiency is pretty much where it's been throughout his career in terms of his finishing around the basket and from the field overall. Plus, you add in all those other things that he brings to the table, then that's the path that Brett and I are talking about. But Jacob, if you end up being right and Simmons still takes enough of a back seat to Embiid, and it's Embiid's team through and through, then he would be more of an MVP candidate. But I'm blindly putting faith in Ben Simmons being more aggressive and upping those scoring numbers this year.
I also, one thing I want to hit on, I think Embiid's the kind of guy who creates his own narrative surrounding this. So say they reach January, February time, and they're at 28 and 7 is their record, something crazy at that time. Embiid is the type of guy, and say he's putting up like 28 and 13. Embiid's the type of guy who's going to start talking smack. He's going to be like, I'm the best player in the league. I'm playing Jokic on the 22nd of February. I'm playing Cat on the 28th. I'm playing Anthony Davis on the 13th of March. Watch me just tear these guys up.
Right. He'll get on the campaign trail.
Yeah, he gets on. Yeah, he's the type of guy that would get on the campaign trail. And I think that matters. Like, that doesn't, when we're talking about the best player in the league, that shit don't matter. But we're talking about the MVP and awards. We know what the voters are like. This kind of stuff matters when we're talking about those awards.
I think if Embiid doesn't look to just hunt for looks on the block all the time and kind of fastens himself as more of like a modern day big in terms of being heavily involved in pick and roll finishing and pick and pop finishing, and he kind of diversifies his approach offensively that way, we know what kind of transcendent defensive talent he is. But if he takes that more, I don't want to call it a backseat approach on offense, because he's still obviously getting the touches in those play types, but I think he needs to be more heavily involved in that. And Doc's come out and said that especially Simmons and Embiid, they're going to be running a lot more pick and roll than they have in years past, which all I can say to that is like, thank God, like I can finally like throw both of my hands up in the air. Like you have, as much as we see LeBron and AD being a dominant pick and roll combination, I think Simmons and Embiid could be a better one. To be perfectly honest with you, and that's the kind of potential that's sitting there for those two. So that's what I would want to see more from Embiid. And I don't know. I mean, I know you guys chimed in a little bit, but I don't know how you guys feel about what I brought up about Embiid's IQ and his floor vision and his play processing. And I don't know. I think an MVP and like having him firmly in that best player in the league conversation, despite him having the talent to be in that conversation, some of those deficiencies just hold him back in that conversation for me.
It's definitely still a deficiency that's present in Embiid's decision making on the block. I will say that his 4 years in the league, turnovers have gone down every year, while not substantially. They still have gone down. And then I'm going to go back to my point about Doc Rivers and a better offensive scheme, which really was lacking with the Sixers the last couple of years. Just going to put Embiid in better situations to score the ball. He's got the touch to do Tim Duncan type stuff. I don't know why he hasn't been. I don't know why Brett Brown didn't make him do that stuff, considering where he came from. But yeah, I don't know why he hasn't been crushing in pick and roll, just like little 14-foot jump shot, one-handed floaters. He's got that type of stuff. He can do that. It's not sexy.
Could you imagine if they brought in Tim Duncan to like teach Embiid the bank shot? Could you imagine?
Right. It's not sexy stuff. It's not stuff Embiid wants to do because he loves, taking people off the bounce a little bit. But I think if you get him going early in that mindset in the season and he's putting up 28 to 32 a game, he's not going to question it. He's just going to keep rolling.
Fair enough. Any other comments, guys?
No, I've said my piece now. Embiid for MVP.
Fair enough. So we'll move on to Toronto. I had one question down for Toronto, but Cole actually thought of a better question to put in here. So I'm actually going to go with his. So last year we saw Siakam's efficiency as an offensive player slip when becoming the team's primary scorer. So what does Toronto do to help him regain his 2018-19 form? Who else steps up on the team? Or was last year just growing pains for a guy who can be a number one? Cole, if you want to take the floor with your own question, by all means, get us started.
Yeah, so I think a little bit was growing pains. I think a little bit of it was Pascal being overextended. You do have to take into account that Pascal has been a late bloomer his whole career, so I think there might be still another step for him to take this year. I can't rule that out. That said, I think OG Anunoby is a guy that a lot of people are expecting to take a big step this year for Toronto as well. He was showing flashes late in the year, but was also at times allergic to trying to score. So it's really still have a question mark how much offensive punch he's going to bring night in and night out for me. So I think Toronto is a really good team. I still think they're missing another big-time scorer, whether it's somebody that unseats Pascal as the number one on that team or it's a guy that can go right along with him.
Yeah, I'm firmly in the OG's about to step up camp. Like, I think I've always sort of seen him on this almost like Kawhi Leonard trajectory, where he's kind of a late bloomer offensively. His defense has kept him on the court, but he's so imposing physically, and the offensive stuff, it really was starting to bloom last season. I'm not saying he's going to be your number one scorer, or your number one option this year, or even at any point he might not really be that guy. But I do think he's going to take a big step forward and lighten Pascal Siakam's load a little bit. I think a little too much was asked of Siakam last year. I'm not quite sure he's that guy. I don't know if he's an ideal number one option. And yes, Cole, like you said, they could use a guy that can really be that.
Yeah, when I read this question, I had to do a kind of try to look back in my memory, try to think what I know historically. Has there ever really been a first option who was thrust into that first option role, had a bad first year, and then kind of flourished, especially at the age he's at? Like, we're thinking 26, 27 years old. I don't think there's ever been someone like that who has taken on the role Siakam's taken on, not done very well. Because that's something I was banging that drum all year. Siakam's in the wrong role. When they're not making the most out of him in Toronto because he's in the wrong role. He should be the number two option, but they just don't have a clear number one. And he is, if not their best player, their best volume scorer in that sense. Like, I don't think Lowry can score at the volume Siakam does. Not that Siakam's incredibly efficient with it, but he can get his shot off and he can score it in bunches. I don't know if anyone's ever taken a jump after showing they can't really do that at that age. And yeah, I went through the options like Van Vliet maybe, or OG as well, but I don't know if I really trust either. Maybe OG will take a jump. That's incredibly possible, but that's less likely than them just not having a clear number one option next year, and that first option kind of falling to Siakam again, him being a bit underwhelming again. They're very good defensively. They're about league average offensively because the system in place is good, and they have a good bunch of players, just no one outstanding. And they kind of saunter into another second round exit, another tough second round out. That's what I see Toronto and for Pascal this year.
Yeah, Anunoby has to take a leap. right? He has to, or else this team, as you just said, Jacob, is destined to repeat the same fate as last year. And I don't really even think that's up for much debate. As good as Siakam is, I don't know if I see another leap for him. Cole's absolutely right in saying that it can happen because of his development pattern up to this point. I don't know if I see it, but I mean, if they had one more like really good scoring wing, and maybe Anunoby is that guy if he takes the jump, but if he's not, if they had one more scoring wing, I still love the rest of the team around them. I mean, Lowry, Van Vliet, and Terrence Davis obviously had some good moments last year. He's probably going to take another step forward this year. Norm Powell on the wing was really consistent for them last year, but he's not like this amazing shot creator. He's more of a kind of like take what the offense kind of gives him guy. But you have Lowry, Van Vliet, Malachi Flynn has gotten rave reports in camp already. Which, by the way, for anyone who listens to this podcast, that should not be a surprise. I was banging on the Malachi Flynn drum in multiple places, almost as hard as I was banging the Cole Anthony drum. To be perfectly honest with everybody, so that doesn't shock me whatsoever. He was a great pickup by Toronto in the draft. I really like the Aaron Baines signing. I know that obviously they lost Gasol and they lost Ibaka, but Baines is an underrated big who I think can step in and do a lot of the same things that those two guys did. Boucher is a stretch five who's definitely going to get more run, and I think that he can take another step up. And then you have Alex Len to kind of fill out that big rotation. So I like the team around Siakam and Anunoby, but are those guys going to be good enough as first and second options respectively, or maybe potentially 1 and 1A if we're lucky enough to see that from Anunoby to do more damage than they already have in the East? My answer to that question is probably no up to this point, but Brett's optimistic about Anunoby. Cole's optimistic about Siakam. I want to see this Raptors team play really well because I think a lot of the talent is there. It's just who's going to step up against some of these better teams in the East. That's all.
I would like to clarify that I'm probably more optimistic about OG taking a step than Pascal. Jacob makes a great point. Who has been given the mantle to only falter in the role, then to overcome that falter, really isn't a great example of that. The only reason I would give Pascal the benefit of the doubt is because of the development path. But again, I don't really know if I totally see that happening.
Fair enough.
True, but historically he is now like 27, 28 is generally prime, and
right.
so maybe he has one more jump to do, but it's going against kind of the tide of history for him to do it.
Definitely, he's probably just a Robin,
which is fine. That's great.
Definitely.
So the Chicago Bulls are next on the list, and Brett, this question is 100% for you because you are the Pat Williams guy. So I'm going to direct this right at you, my friend. Will Patrick Williams be good enough to force his way into the starting lineup and in turn force the Bulls to make a trade and collect assets on one of those front court pieces?
I don't see him starting at any point this year. I mean, if Otto Porter goes down, sure, but I think the Bulls are going to try to compete and try to get into the playoffs. And as much as I love Pat Williams, I think he's a little too raw to have that much of a role right away. I mean, maybe he's got a little more to his game than we saw, but with him, I just think, so much of it is potential. And that's why I love him so much. I think he has a ton of potential. It's kind of like I am with OG. It's one of the reasons I've always been high on him. I think he's got a similar type of potential, different kind of player, but but I don't really see it as a rookie. I'm tempering my expectations for him right out of the gate, quite a bit. So I don't see him stepping into the starting lineup this year. But if Otto went down with an injury, then maybe, or if they're, out of contention, for a playoff spot, if they're really bottoming out, maybe they throw him out there. But I think they're going to try to make the playoffs, and I don't think you could really do that with Patrick Williams as a starter this year.
What's the temperature check for you guys for Chicago? Because I'm still not completely sold on what they have. My biggest problem with them last year, I know that I talked with Cole about this last season at multiple points, is that they just don't have a guard who can play pick and roll at a high level to really bring more things into ebb and flow into the offense. Like, for as good as a scorer as Levine is, He's not really like a point guard type. He's kind of proven that throughout his career. I think Kobe White is pretty much like the same kind of scoring guard and should play and should style his game and tailor it similarly to what Levine's done in his career. I don't see a starting guard that can really orchestrate the pieces that are on that roster. And if things falter with the Bulls, if they don't get into playoff contention, as Brett thinks they're trying to do, I don't know if they're going to pay Lauri Markkanen and give him the money that he's probably going to want on an extension. I don't know what they're going to do with Lauri. If Wendell Carter's not healthy, I don't know what they're going to do there. Obviously, the Porter piece, they're definitely going to move off of Porter at some point. I think they wanted to try to trade for him to see, hey, if we have a team here, then Porter can definitely be the 3 that we're missing to kind of fill the gap. But if the team doesn't improve around Porter, then they're probably going to get off of him too. So I think this Bulls team is still in a lot of flux. I don't know how you guys, Jacob and Cole, feel about the Bulls.
Not not great, honestly. You asked me this question. I honestly I don't have them making the top 8. I think they might be able to squeeze into the play-in. And like you say, the cap sheet for this team isn't great right now, and it's going to get worse as Markkanen and as Wendell Carter come up for their extensions. Zach LaVine will be up for an extension after next year. I don't totally see this team's future, and yeah, if they are in the play-in, if they're the 9th seed, then what are we doing here? Honestly, let's do something, because like you say, Porter's contract is tradable at this stage as a expiring deal, big contract. You could probably get some good assets back for that if you are willing to take on more years from another player. LaVine is very tradable, I think, to a good team that might be looking for a scorer. And then you can get more on like the Kobe White and Patrick Williams timeline. Maybe you trade Lowry or Carter, whichever one you're less high on, and you give the other one an extension, and then try to go into the draft this year, get a really good player. Like, you guys will have a better idea about who they could be targeting, but I think that's really on the cards for Chicago, because I'm not high on this roster.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I as well am not that high on this roster and how it fits together in terms of making a playoff push. I don't even have them in the top 10 if they do the extended playoff standings this year. I think it's in their best interest to tank. And as to Nate's point, they don't have a guard that can run pick and roll stuff. They don't really have that true lead guard. Haven't probably since D Rose. Jalen Suggs is atop the draft. Would be a pretty interesting guy to fit alongside Kobe White and some of those other guys. I think they're in discovery mode this year. And like the Knicks, they just have a lot of messes to sort out. My guy to watch, if anybody, is Chandler Hutchison. I just think he's got something to prove still, and nobody's really counting on him. So I think he's going to make some waves.
Yeah, so I would almost think he would step up into that starting small forward spot before Patrick Williams does. And and to your points about the lead ball handler, I think Patrick Williams, as much as I love his potential, I think he was kind of a strange choice for them. I would think that even a guy like Halliburton might make more sense for them, or Killian Hayes. It was a little bit of an odd pick, but they must really see something in him. They must really like him. So,
right.
But yeah, I think the play-in kind of changes things. I think we'll see a couple of teams making a push to get into that normally might just say, screw it. And I think the Bulls could be one of those teams. Like, if they're close enough, hey, if we can get into the play-in, then we got a chance at the playoffs. So I think that's going to change things a little bit in the league and make it a little bit more competitive for a couple of these teams.
Definitely agree. I just see the Bulls trying for 3 weeks and it just going horribly wrong, and then forced.
that could definitely happen.
So this next team that we're going to move to, it's funny when we talk about the Bulls roster and how I don't really like it a ton. I think we're pretty much all in agreement now with that. The Cleveland Cavaliers, to me, have a really intriguing roster for this upcoming season. Maybe not as many guys in total quantity that I like trotting out on the court as much as like Chicago, for example, but the quality of the guys they do have getting on the floor this year, I think makes them a really intriguing team, especially with the Isaac Okoro draft pick. Obviously, you have Darius Garland and Colin Sexton getting another round at it as the guard rotation. You still have Kevin Love and Andre Drummond. So while Sexton's not like this all-world defender guard because at the end of the day, he's the size that he is, so he can only do so much. He's still one of the most competitive guards in the league. On defense, obviously, Okoro is really going to help out on defense, and you still have Andre Drummond grabbing rebounds at an alarming rate and patrolling the paint. So my question was, will the Garland-Sexton starting backcourt experiment fare better this year than last? But I guess I can kind of make it just like an overarching temperature check of where you're at on the Cavaliers. Cole, I'll start with you more on the first part of the question, because I know that while I've been quick to defend Sexton, I kind of wanted to leave the Garland station a little bit last year, and you were one of the people that was reminding me that Garland's coming off of an injury and that we should be a little more patient with him.
Yeah, I think a lot of the same situation for Cole Anthony this past year could be said for Garland, except for you have to add in the ACL injury for Garland. The dude came out of high school, was one of the top talents, got to Vanderbilt, lit it up in 5 games, and then the knee blew out. So he was kind of doing what Kyrie was doing in a sense for Duke. I think people are forgetting also that Cleveland hired a first-year coach in the NBA last year, and that went horribly wrong by all accounts. And Garland was also made the starting point guard for an NBA team coming off the injury and with that first-year coach. I think that's a lot to handle for a rookie. He was also thrown into the mix with Colin Sexton. I think it's a win for the Cavaliers that these two didn't come out of the season hating each other, given everything that happened. So, yeah, I think it's fair that they get another crack at it. I think it's fair to expect that they're going to be a lot better this year. I as well am intrigued in the Cavaliers. And don't forget about Dylan Windler.
I heard he looks good.
Yeah.
Really good. Yeah, can shoot the ball. He'll be interesting. He could add something to them. And I'll say this, like, I'm more of a Garland guy than a Sexton guy. I think Garland is extremely skilled, and I'm by no means out on him. I think that injury was a factor, and he just kind of got off to a slow start, but he started to put it together later in the season, and I like his potential. I would do this. I would look, if I was going to trade one of the guys, I would look to trade Sexton, but I do think it's worth probably giving it another look, like you said. But I would maybe reconfigure the backcourt, and I would like to bring Sexton off the bench. I don't know how much him and Garland can play together. I would rather have it be Garland and KPJ with Sexton as like a 6th man. Like, I really think ultimately that's going to be his best role in the NBA is like a 6th man microwave scorer more than like a lead ball handler in a starting lineup. And I think Garland can play that role. So I would just reconfigure it a little bit and maybe have them share the court a little bit less. And that could be doable with KPJ's continued development and also the potential emergence of Windler.
Yeah, I do not see this backcourt fitting together. I mean, the question of can they be better than last year is a bit misleading, because it's like, can they be better than just about the worst ever? So, and I hope so, but I don't see it being much more than that. I do think Garland particularly has shown all the indicators that he could be a great shooter and a good ball handler, and that's what you would like out of your point guard. How much he's ever going to offer defensively, I mean, that's, who cares? Yeah, I think Sexton should be playing the 6th man role and probably will eventually get shipped out if Garland shows real signs of life this year. I'm not too big on him personally. I'm not too big on either of them. I'm not too big on this team. But, I mean, it's a nice 13th seed this year. Would be nice for them, I guess.
Wow, you're a lot lower on them than I am, Jacob. I think the Cavaliers are my team in the East that I would pick to shock people. I think they're going to make noise. I'm sorry. I really like the makeup of this team. I like the pieces that they have in place. I like the fact that, as we talked about, they have a real coach now. So I don't know. I think the Cavs are really going to come out and surprise some people. I guess only time will tell. But I think they're going to fare better than the team we're going to talk about next, which would be the Pistons. And I actually have a question from the audience. Shout out to Trevor, somebody I knew back in high school, asked us this question on social media. Does Troy Weaver move off of Blake and or D Rose to get back assets to build around the young guys, or retain them for the full year for veteran mentorship?
Can I start just by saying that it's really cute to think they want to build around the young guys based on their off-season moves? It's nonsensical. That when every move they've made has been to the detriment of Killian Hayes and Demboya's development. I do think Rose has some value. I think because he's on a very tradable contract and he could be a good sixth man for a lot of teams. I can see them getting assets back. And Blake apparently has some trade value. Apparently, I don't see it personally, but that's what I've heard from like Zach Lowe. He's been saying that teams have been asking about Blake, which is interesting. I don't see it, and I wouldn't be shocked about any move this team makes. Just say I'm a Detroit Pistons fan this year because I love a good train wreck, and this is set up to be really good train wreck.
I think the dream is to sort of rehab Blake's image and value and maybe move him by the deadline. I mean, I think that's the dream scenario for them. I don't know what you could get back for him at this point. Maybe if you take back some bad salary, you could get a first rounder, but something just, with the future in mind. But yeah, that obviously nothing about their team makes sense. The Jeremy Grant thing doesn't make sense. The burying Doumbouya behind like six guys that play the same position doesn't make sense. But I think they'll hope to move Blake, and I could see them keeping Rose around as like a mentor for Killian Hayes. That almost seems like what's going on right now, just with the way that Rose has been talking about him, and there might be something there. So I think their goal is to probably move Blake if at all possible, and I'm sure they'd move D Rose too for the right offer. But I could see him having some value as a mentor to their young point guard.
I don't have much different to add there. I think Blake would be the preferred one to move. The fit is going to be tough around the league, definitely. Sneaky fit, maybe the Warriors. They kind of need some front court presence, and he's pretty skilled. He could fit into that offense a little bit, play next to Draymond. But I really don't have too many other takers off the top of my head.
The Warriors are probably in like a wait and see approach with
Right.
Blake to see how he comes back. But yeah, I agree with you 100%, Cole. I think if Blake's going to be moved and he's good enough to add value this year, then I think the Warriors have to have him at the top of their trade list if they really want to still contend this year. I agree completely.
Move Wiggins for him.
Yeah,
That's be
yeah.
Wiggins, right?
I probably would if that deal was good enough to come across, and we're going to discuss Wiggins when we get into the West with the Warriors. But I mean, if you're talking Steph, Kelly Oubre, Blake, James Wiseman, while it's not the same kind of offense shooting wise, that you're talking about so much IQ and ball movement on the floor at that point that's pretty intriguing and hard to pass up on if you have that opportunity. So.
Oh, yeah.
And Blake's become a pretty good shooter with the absence of his athleticism in the last year or two.
Yep. Better shooter than Draymond.
The Indiana Pacers. Are we sure the Pacers are that much worse than last year? Are we really sure they're worse? Because everyone wants to like jump off of their ship completely and say if one team in the East is definitely has the potential to fall off and let somebody else come up, that it's Indiana. And that's pretty much the question, the answer you're getting from everybody that's in the media and who talks about basketball. So I'll open it up to you guys because I look at the team, man, I really don't think they're going to be worse than last year. I think they're pretty much going to stay the course unless Oladipo really falls off in terms of his play, or if something happens and he just doesn't want to be there and they have to move him during the season. But if he's there, if he's healthy, if he's playing well, I think they're the same team as last year. I don't see a drop off.
I think Oladipo torpedoed them in the bubble with his shot selection. He was out of control. It was some of the most irresponsible offense I've ever seen. I mean, the guy was shooting like runners from the corner three. Like, I mean, it was ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it. I thought he was terrible. I thought he really hurt them. And even when he came back last season before the hiatus, he really hurt them too. I think they lost maybe 8 or 9 straight when he came back after they had been playing pretty well with Brogdon kind of running things. So I actually think Oladipo, unless he, returns to form, I think he hurts them with his play on the court. And also just the fact that he doesn't want to be there and everybody knows it. And he's really looking like a bad teammate at this point. If any of those reports are true about him talking to other teams in front of his own team about wanting to, can I come join you guys? Like if he's really that guy, and obviously he'll deny all that stuff, but a lot of times when there's smoke, there's fire. And So I just think for a number of reasons, he really hurts them. And just having him there is going to make them a worse team. Honest, as crazy as that sounds, because he was a pretty nice player a couple years ago, but I don't think he's that guy anymore. I think he has sort of an inflated idea of what he is as a player. I think he thinks he's a number one guy still. I don't know if he ever was, but he definitely thinks he is. And I think they'd be better off without him. And look, even if they don't get that much worse, I think a couple teams in the East are getting better that could sort of leapfrog them. Like I think the Wizards and the Hawks, to name a couple, could easily leapfrog Indiana. So even if Indiana doesn't fall off that hard, I still think they're a prime candidate to fall, below the 8th seed.
Not to move this along too fast, but I see an opportunity to kind of combine two teams and two questions here, because while we're talking about Oladipo, Brett, you're bringing up a lot of good points. What if their neighbors next door, the Milwaukee Bucks, actually make a move for Victor Oladipo now that the Bogdan stuff has fallen through? It obviously can't be revisited. He's going to be with the Hawks. What if they would look at Oladipo and say, hey, if he doesn't want to be in Indiana, but he's healthy and he can still add value, that's a piece that with Drew Holiday in that backcourt, I think that would certainly help the Bucks contend in the East and further cement themselves as one of the leading teams to come out? Or do you guys think that they're going to stand pat? Can somebody like Dante DiVincenzo still step up, have another jump to make, and help the Bucks kind of stay in course with what they want to do in the East?
I think if that trade could be made, I think it would have to be Dante back to Indiana plus filler. I think at this point, Depot's value is so low. If I'm Milwaukee, I'm saying, look, we give you DiVincenzo and then we make up the salary. That's all you're getting for Depot, or you can go out and try and find a better offer for him, because I don't think there is one. Honestly, Oladipo, like Brett said, torpedoed the Pacers last year. Since his injury, he's been shooting 41% from the floor. And even like there are some good scorers, some good volume shooters who can shoot 41% from the floor. And right now, Depot is not that. He has been just leaking value. And when the biggest thing that's come out of the offseason for the Pacers is Miles Turner and Oladipo's sister having an argument on Twitter, that tells you how little you've done and how little is going to happen. Because just looking down the East, you've got Philadelphia, Miami, Brooklyn, Atlanta, Washington, Charlotte. I don't think all those teams have leapfrogged Indiana, but they were all below them last year, and they're at least all a lot closer or above Indiana right now. I have Indiana in the play-in. I don't see them getting much further than that. And the Oladipo thing this summer, someone's lying there ultimately. Either Oladipo's lying about those things not being true, or one of the teammates is spreading rumors about him, which is either way, it's a fucking toxic environment and something needs to change.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you guys have just said. I don't think Oladipo is much of a Budenholzer guy from top to bottom on the court, and then just in terms of personality, based off what we've been hearing over the last 12 months. So I think I think if you're the Bucks, you stand pat. I think if you're the Pacers, you're probably going to be worse this year. I agree with Brett that a couple teams have gotten better, like the Wizards, and they should be able to surpass the Pacers. One thing we also have to look at within this season is that travel is reduced. You're going to be playing your division a lot. And so the teams with stronger divisions are going to be kicking teams with chemistry issues, and that's the Pacers down the ladder real quick, in my opinion. I think Dante does take another step. He was slow out the gate at Villanova, and then by his third year, he was taking over the NCAA tournament. So he's not going to take over the NBA Finals for the Bucks, but he could have moments where he really shows that type of player again.
Yeah, I think he could be, at least 80% of what Bogdanović is going to be this season.
Yeah.
He's going into his third year. He's maybe 23 still. He's young enough, and he was really good for them in spots last year. He had a couple of stretches of games where he rebounds the ball really well for his size, and I think he's a better shooter than his numbers show. I think he could be a 38% 3-point shooter. So I think he could take a leap and be not that much worse than Bogdanović will be or would have been for them. And I don't know. The Oladipo fit makes sense there on paper with Milwaukee, but because of all the issues we've talked about, and just I would rather just roll with Dante if he would be the guy that you have to give up. I'd rather just keep him. I think he can get a lot better. He's a much better defensive player than Bogdanovich.
I was
Like
gonna say he's an
he's
animal of a team
yeah,
defender.
his
Yeah.
advanced defensive metrics last year were fantastic. So
Right.
I know some of that was their team and their system, but he is a good defensive player for sure.
Right. Now you take him off the ball just a little bit with Drew in house, he's going to be wreaking havoc. Like him and Drew off ball and on ball together, that's a nightmare for the other team's perimeter, in my opinion.
It could
Yeah.
end up being that it was a blessing in disguise that the Bogdanovich thing fell through.
Right.
It could be.
I mean, I do really like. I agree with you guys. I really like Dante. I think it really speaks to him that he clearly knows how lucky he was to go to Milwaukee as they're ascending to contention. Because, like you guys say, his effort on defense and how hard he tries and how well he fits into the team and tries to fit in, that speaks to a high character. That speaks to someone who just wants to get on the floor and play and win games. And that's a great thing. I like the trade for Indiana. If they could get him, I think he would actually make them better than having Depot this year. I look at that and I'm like, yeah, that's a really good like extra guy in your guard rotation with Brogdon. Like that's really good. So at this point, do I value Dante DiVincenzo more than I value Victor Oladipo? Probably. In terms of contract plus impact plus team chemistry, yeah, probably.
The only thing I'll say about DiVincenzo before I move us along to the Atlanta Hawks is I just hope that if he's going to be with the Bucks for the Bucks' sake, that he remains engaged, because when you involve a young player in trade talks and you pretty much have a deal done and then it falls through, especially given the fact that he is still young, is still getting better, as we all can agree on. I just hope he doesn't look at that the wrong way and kind of torpedoes himself for the Bucks. I hope that he keeps staying and playing hard and brings a good attitude to the team, because he is expected to be one of their main contributors this year if he's there. And just for his sake, I hope that his mind's in the right place, and I hope that he didn't take that too personally, because the NBA is a business. But they're going to look to him to make a leap. I think he's perfectly capable of taking a leap, as you guys have all laid out perfectly. And I just hope that the chemistry stuff stays there and stays strong, because he's a good kid. You don't got to get me to jump on the DiVincenzo hype train. Before he came into that draft, before he lit it up in the tournament for Villanova, Cole and I had plenty of conversations. We were singing his praises pretty much that whole year in terms of how we viewed him.
Before you move us on real quick, I got to see Dante's first game coming off his redshirt year, and obviously in warm-ups he was flying through the gym. He was making crazy dunks and highlight reels type stuff. Get to the game, he looks like a mess of limbs and a deer in headlights. And there were people calling for him to transfer his first year after Villanova. So I think he'll handle this whole trade scenario just fine. I think this is, he's exactly where he needs to be, and he's going to be happy to execute and come out and prove everybody wrong.
I hope so. So getting to the Hawks, how do the Hawks sort out their logjam at the 2 through 4 spots, and which is the best combo of 2 through 4 to build around the Trae Young, Clint Capella dynamic moving forward, if that's going to be the dynamic moving forward? And who knows, maybe Onyeka Okongwu surprises us a lot with how he comes in and sets himself apart from other guys in that rotation. Maybe the Hawks see him and maybe he comes out of the gate really strong and he kind of makes Capella a potential chip to maybe move again. I don't know how all that works out, but right now we're going to assume that Trae Young, Clint Capella is the pick and roll combo that the Hawks want to build around. So how do you guys see that 2 through 4 logjam kind of solving itself?
Cam Reddish.
It's a good one. Yeah.
Talent wins the day, and Cam Reddish is going to show up and show why.
Love Cam Reddish. Yeah, he's definitely my favorite of that bunch as well. I like him significantly more than DeAndre Hunter. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's got to be, if you're talking about a 2 through 4, I think long term, I mean, I guess you paid Bogdanovich, so it's got to be Bogey, Cam, and John Collins. I mean, and then of course Herter, where does he fit in? But he's just going to have to be your bench guy. But I think Reddish is the most exciting of the bunch. Maybe they look to move Collins at some point. Maybe Reddish can even play some 4. down the road, but I think they value Collins a lot too.
Gallinari in the mix too.
Yep, but they say he's going to be coming off the bench, and then he's only partially guaranteed in that third year of his deal. So he's there for 2 years. I think if we're thinking long term, he's probably not going to be part of it. I don't know. They're just like collecting players. It's really weird. I've felt like they're building up to make a big trade or something. It's like you're just collecting all these players, and it's just so hard to see how they fit together. But
Right.
I guess if Gallo's coming off the bench, it makes a little bit of sense. But I don't know. I hope it doesn't hurt the development of guys like Reddish and Herter.
Yeah, I hope they don't alienate any of the young guys.
Right.
You're pretty much telling them like, hey, you're not good enough to play minutes with Trey. Trey obviously wants to move this team into a contending direction or at least getting on that path. So we're going to go out and get him veterans who actually can play alongside him at a high level. You guys just aren't good enough. You're going to come off the bench. And whether they like it or not, that's kind of the message they're sending somebody like a Kevin Herter, like a DeAndre Hunter. And I talked about before the draft, and I know I even said it to you and to you two, especially Brett and Jacob, about maybe liking one of those other young wings to like light a fire underneath some of those other guys. But it's one thing to kind of bring in young competition to maybe help some of those guys reach their potential and get better just on pure motivation. It's another to essentially bring in a veteran replacement and say, hey, you're not good enough for this role. And I just really hope they're not ruining the dynamic and the mentality of some of those young guys. I don't know, but time's going to tell on that one.
I think to a certain extent they will, because I'm trying to look at this roster and think, like, I do think the Trey, Bogdan, Cam Reddish, John Collins, Capella lineup is probably, assuming we know Gallo has said he's going to be the sixth man or whatever, that's probably their most talented lineup. But also, if that's your lineup, Capella's the only proven defender and Cam is a hypothetically very good defender. Then you've got John Collins, you've got Bogey, and you've got Trey Young. I don't really trust that. And if I want to lean into a bit more defense, maybe I'm going to take out John Collins and put Hunter at the 4. And if I'm doing that, at that point, if Gallo's still my sixth man, like one of Gallo and John Collins is the odd man out here. And that doesn't even touch on the guard rotation of having Trey, Bogey, Rondo, Chris Dunn, Herter. Like there are too many mouths to feed on this team. Not everyone can get the minutes that they want or the minutes that the young players need. So I do agree. I think there's got to be some rumblings that come December 15th or whatever, whenever I don't think it's December 15th. I don't know what the date set this year that the contracts are tradable again, whatever that date is. I see them looking to make a big move. And I think at that point, there might be a bit of discontent amongst the team because there's just too many players to give time to.
I agree completely. Moving on to the Charlotte Hornets, is LaMelo Ball actually the missing ingredient the Hornets need to get into playoff contention? And I don't know where you guys sit on the Hornets. I don't know if you guys have them as kind of like your play-in team or one of your play-in teams, or if they're still far enough away from that. I think LaMelo Ball, listen, if the people around him certainly help him achieve his potential quicker than maybe is originally anticipated. So in other words, as long as he has the right chemistry fits around him, he gets the support from the coaching staff in the front office like I think he's going to get. I think he could come out of the gate and really shock some people. Who knows? Maybe he even gets into like that all-star conversation, not in terms of like him actually making the East All-Star team or the collective, but maybe at least putting his name in the conversation if everything breaks right. I think for as much as I had LaMelo Ball fourth on my board, I really like the Hornets fit the more and more that I think about it. And I think he has enough pieces around him to maybe come out and shock some people. I don't know where you guys sit on him and the Hornets as a collective.
I like the fit. I thought this was probably the best place for him to land in the top 3. I think he's one of the missing ingredients the Hornets will eventually need. I don't think the other missing ingredient is on that roster. They don't have a number 1 or 2 or 1A or second banana guy next to LaMelo. I think PJ Washington's a really good number 3, but I don't think you want him being a second guy next to somebody like LaMelo. And I don't even know if you expect LaMelo to be the number one scorer on your team. He just is going to have the ball in his hands a lot and be the straw that stirs the drink for whatever offense he is a part of. But yeah, I think they're still missing one big ingredient, but he's definitely a big piece for them.
I mean, isn't the missing ingredient someone else that will play defense? I mean, for real, like who do they have? Like that backcourt is leaky as anything with LaMelo and Devontae Graham, and maybe Rozier comes in, plays hard, but it's hardly going to move the needle. Then you get to like Miles Bridges, who I'm unsure about. He seems like almost a Kevin Knox who has been in a more advantageous situation in his first couple years. I'm not too high on him. Washington, I am high on. Gordon Hayward obviously is an overpay, but probably going to be their actual best player this year. And yeah, I'm not a fan. I really like this team. I think this team's going to be really interesting offensively. I don't think defensively they're going to be good enough to really challenge for the play-in top 10, top 8, whatever you want to say, positions. LaMelo is good, but we really have to see him in an NBA setting to see. Like, I can't judge personally how good he's going to be in the NBA until you see it happen. I'm reserving judgment.
Yeah, I'm optimistic that he could eventually take them to the next level. But if we're talking about this season and they somehow do contend for a playoff spot, I think that's going to be more a product of Gordon Hayward playing at an all-star level and really just elevating them. I'm not sure that LaMelo on his own makes them better. Like, I'm not sure that he's a net positive as a rookie. He probably isn't. I think eventually he will be, but not this season. So long term, sure. And I agree, though, they would need to definitely put some more pieces around him and bolster their defense a little bit. I do like the Martin twins a lot. They're really fun, and they can play some defense. And I think they really, they could help sort of fill that hole for the team. But yeah, I don't really see them. Maybe they could make the play in, but I don't know. A lot of questions with that team, and I'm not expecting too much from LaMelo. A lot of highlights, I think, as a rookie, but I'm not sure he's going to have like a positive impact on that team right away.
I guess my optimism kind of comes from a lineup that I can envision pretty well in seeing LaMelo with one of either Rozier or Graham, depending on how you want to split offense and defense. And then with Bridges, Hayward, and then PJ Washington playing the 5, he's the coaching staff, and he's actually come out and said that it's in the cards for PJ to be prepared to play a lot more center this year than he did last year. And that to me is really intriguing because I think PJ Washington is a good enough rim protector at the 5, and I certainly don't think you're losing anything on the boards having him as well as Bridges attacking to rebound, as well as Hayward's obviously a big wing who can rebound, and then LaMelo is 6'7" himself. So I don't think you lose anything from a rebounding perspective in that lineup. Obviously, that's a quicker lineup to be able to play more transition ball and get guys easier looks. And defensively, I know we kind of want to bag on LaMelo a little bit, but I guess my defense for him defensively coming in was that he is big, he is long. Obviously, he can hold his own to some degree defensively, even if he's not always engaged. But if they can get the most out of him defensively, especially in a lineup where it's Rozier instead of Graham next to him, I think those lineups could cause a lot more damage than people think. And maybe that is a big reason why I'm a little more optimistic about what the Hornets could do this season, not necessarily counting that Cody Zeller is going to be locked in at the center spot and is going to play the majority of the center minutes. I think they're going to figure out pretty quick that PJ Washington is a capable center to step in and play that role. Don't know if anybody had any thoughts about that or not.
I would just throw in that, honestly, I hated the Gordon Hayward signing for this team. I get it. They kind of needed that veteran guy to shepherd some of these younger dudes along. But like you said, Brett, the Martin twins are super interesting. Jalen McDaniels is super interesting, Jaden's brother. I wanted to see them kind of let their talent play out and see what they have with these guys and also situate themselves really, really well for next year and get that next guy to put with LaMelo. But that's not going to be the case, it seems. At least that's not what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I don't know what they're trying to do. It's odd. I understand the Hayward signing from one standpoint, but it's not what I would have done. It's not what I wanted to see them do. So
We'll see how good LaMelo can be this year, and I guess that's really going to be the tell-all of how quickly the Hornets can ascend. So we'll see. Moving on to a real contender, the team that was in the finals last year, representing the Eastern Conference, the Miami Heat. My question: will Tyler Hero be a viable contender for the Most Improved Player award? Brett, I'll start with you on this one.
I'm just going to say no, because it's extremely rare for a second-year player to win Most Improved. If you go down the list, I think it's been one, maybe two in the last 20 years. Anyway, I know Gilbert Arenas did it, and I think there's one other guy maybe, but it's rare. And also, I think that Hero really elevated his status in the bubble to where I think he's going to pick up, essentially where he left off, which was playing really well. But it's not going to come as a surprise, or the improvement's not going to be quite as jarring, as it would have been if there had been no bubble. If he was just, if he got to that level like he did in the bubble. If there was like a Most Improved between pre-hiatus and the bubble, he probably would have won that. But I think because he already elevated his status so much, he's just not quite going to be in that conversation. I know if you look at his stats probably from last season overall, and then this season, it probably is going to be a nice jump, but I'm not sure as a second-year guy he's going to make a big enough jump on top of what he did in the bubble to really garner too much consideration.
So you think it's more of that he won't make that big of a leap versus just because I guess like you can make the argument one of two ways. Either you don't think he's going to take that big of a leap, or you think that because it's year one going into year two, obviously you expect a year two player to improve over the year one version. So I guess you're kind of leaning towards you just don't see the jump.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be essentially what he was in the bubble. I don't think he's going to be that much better than that. So it's because we've already seen it, because the voters have already seen it. It's like, yeah, we knew he was this. Like, I don't think it's going to look like as much of an improvement as it would otherwise. It's just such a weird situation. But yeah, and also it is hard for a second-year guy to win it. Like Luka didn't win it in his second year. I mean,
yeah, which is nonsensical.
Pretty much says it all right there.
Yeah.
I do agree. It's actually a question I posed in our group on Facebook that about Jamal Murray, whether Jamal Murray's breakout in the playoffs and in the bubble is going to color expectations for this coming season, and whether him averaging 25 points again is going to be impressive to voters in this award based on what he did in the bubble. Even though last year, in the regular season, he put up like 18, 4 and 4 or something. Like if he puts up 25 points and 7 assists, are people really going to see it as that big a jump because their perceptions are going to be altered by the bubble? I think I agree with Brett. I think the same could happen in this because Tyler Hero had an excellent bubble. His passing improved, his playmaking and the pick and roll. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes into next season and puts up like 18, 5 and 5, which is a huge jump because he put up like 13, 4 and 2 in his rookie season. That's a big jump, especially as a lead ball handler, as a playmaker. That's great. I agree that I don't know if people are really going to view it as that big a jump because of what happened to Miami in the bubble and because of, like Brett said, the whole second year player, which to me it's nonsense. But I agree there is a precedent that they just don't really vote for second year players in this award.
Yeah, there's lots of precedents that the NBA voters follow for awards, which is part of the reason, again, jumping back to the Ben Simmons thing real quick, he won't get it this year because even if he does make the jump, it'd be his first year at that level, and the NBA voters just don't do that. Yeah, when you have guys like Luka and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander who took the jumps they did last year and they don't win the award, I think it's tough to put Hero in the conversation this year. One guy I think could be in the discussion would be De'Aaron Fox if he stays healthy for the whole year. But no, I don't see Hero being a contender this year.
Fair enough. I guess I'm in a minority camp then that I think that he can take enough of a leap to put himself in contention for the award. Although you guys made probably one of the best points I've heard all night, definitely. That if Luka couldn't win the Most Improved award, then what chance really does Hero have in the same year? So only time will tell. But I expect big things from Hero from Miami this year. I think they're going to feed a lot more responsibility his way, and I think he's going to take that bull by the horns and really show what he's made of. I think Miami is definitely going to have a better regular season record this year than they did last year. And I don't see them going away anytime soon. I think they're going to make the same impact. So moving on to the other main team in Florida here, we have the Orlando Magic. Do the Magic stand pat with this roster and be more patient with the young guys while riding out this collection of veterans for a playoff spot? Or is there a fire sale to be had? I'll open that one up for discussion.
Do you think they're going to make a playoff spot? Personally, I don't believe they will.
You don't
this
think
year.
they're in for the play-in?
Not even top 10, honestly. I don't believe. I think the fire sale was more when they were making the 8th seed, and now, I mean, I think they probably will. I think them getting the 12th seed is pretty on the cards, and this is a fire sale that they should have had maybe a year or two ago, really gone into the tank and stopped. Because right now they've been, around like between the 10th and 15th pick for the past few years, and haven't really gotten, apart from they hit on like Isaac, and we hope they've hit on Cole Anthony this year, but it's really, this Orlando team has been treading water for a while now. I don't see them really doing a fire sale that they should be doing, and I don't see them making the playoffs. I just see a slow decline into terribleness for them.
If they do fire sale, Vucevic has to be like the best player that would be on the trade market at that point. Then somebody would want to snatch him up.
Yeah.
He is so underrated. Nobody talks about him.
He is. I think he'll be available, and I think Aaron
Celtics.
Gordon. Hey, ooh, I like that. I think Aaron Gordon will be available, and I think they will move Fournier. I mean, he's not, in my opinion, a part of their long-term plans. He's on his last year of his deal. He picked up his player option, and he's a guy that could really help a team like maybe the Bucks. Somebody like that. So I think Fournier will get moved, and I wouldn't be surprised if at least two of those guys I mentioned got moved. I think there will be a fire sale.
I think so too, and I'll just chime in that these type of vets, Fournier, Gordon, and even Vucevic a little bit, they're not necessarily the type you want around for shepherding young guys into a more professional mind state. I think if you're Orlando, it's time to get rid of these guys. Let Chuma and Cole Anthony and Fultz figure it out. Get Isaac back, and lay your cards right for the draft next year, and really break into the top 6 pick like you should have been doing the last 2 years. But to their credit, I mean, to pull Isaac, Okiki, and Cole Anthony, it could be some really good drafting on their part.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Magic are in prime position to trade some of those guys, get real assets back. And yeah, this next draft, as we know, is going to be incredibly loaded. So if they land a top pick in this upcoming draft, that could be the last piece of the puzzle that they really need to build out their future long-term as a contender in the East, going back to their days with Dwight Howard and a lot of other cats that I'm sure we all hold fond in our memories. So rounding out the East, the Washington Wizards. My question, I did not bite for the majority media question that's like, how are Russell Westbrook and Brad Beal definitely going to mesh together? Because I think they're both going to be dynamic and awesome as a pairing. But should Denny Avdia be much more of a rookie of the year threat than the odds makers are giving him credit, and just kind of give our audience what that actually looks like? The last line I looked at was that he was a 24-1 pick for rookie of the year. That is far too low for a talent that I had third on my board. Whoever wants to chime in on that one, please. But yeah, that's my take, that I think Avdia is going to be a real missing ingredient for this Wizards team at the wing, whether you want to label him as a 3, as a 4, just putting another guy out there who can make quick, smart decisions with the ball in their hands next to Westbrook and Beal, who are obviously primary offensive initiators in their own right. They just do it differently. This is going to be a really dangerous offensive team if Avdia comes up to speed and is as good of a player right out of the gate as I think he can and he will be.
So that has him, I think the list that I saw had him 5th, maybe 6th.
I think he's 6th or 7th. He did not make the top 5.
Wow. So it's behind LaMelo, Wiseman, Edwards,
Toppin,
of course. Yup. And then maybe Halliburton. But anyway, I think that's fair. Maybe he's a little low. I mean, I'll say this, like, we don't know quite how these guys are going to produce as rookies, but if the Wizards could be like a 6 seed, say, which I think is possible, and he's their starting small forward, and he averages 13 points a game, say. That could be enough to get it done in this class. Depending on other people's production, I could see that. If he's a solid contributing starting player on a legit playoff team, that could get it done. And, he's one of the few guys in this conversation that really has a chance to contribute for a good team. So, and Wiseman obviously would be the other one in that particular conversation. So I could see it. Yeah, I'd say it's a little low. I'd probably have him maybe fourth, but I don't know. I have a hard time predicting what he's going to do. I do think he's going to start for them for at least for the bulk of the season.
You don't want to bet on young players with your buddy. That's a lesson I've learned far too often.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm saying. It's tough, man.
Yeah, I just think the makeup with Russell Westbrook, Beal, maybe he beats out Hachimura for the small forward starting spot. Sure, I could see that happening, but then you got also Bertans, Thomas Bryant, all these guys want to shoot. So how much does Avdia really get that much really say in the offense? I think no matter how talented he is, if he wins the Rookie of the Year, it's going to be very much in the Malcolm Brogdon mold of, you just put up pretty okay numbers on a good team, and there wasn't really anyone else who really shone in this class. I think someone is going to, and I don't know who that is yet. My money's on Cole Anthony taking that.
There we go.
Yeah, I think he will. I think I said it before. I think he'll beat out Fultz quite early for the starting spot because I think he's more dynamic than Fultz is with Fultz's whatever jumper. And I think that Orlando team is set up for him to do that. I don't think this Washington team is really set up for Avdia to get maybe more than like 11 points per game. And I don't think unless we are talking about that 2016 class where, Ben Simmons was injured and Brandon Ingram didn't do much and Jaylen Brown didn't do much and Embiid played like 27, 30 games and Brogdon just kind of walked into the Rookie of the Year. Unless something like that happens, I don't see Avdia getting it, honestly.
Yeah, fair enough. Go ahead, Cole.
Yeah, I don't have Denny winning it this year. And I was just as high on him as you, Nate, there. I just think it's a matter of, Westbrook's in town. Good luck getting touches. Got to mention Troy Brown Jr. in all this, who's got a, maybe a hold on the small forward position better than Rui does even. I think we're going to see why Denny should have been drafted higher than he was this year, but I don't think he's Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I mean, I think his experience will lend itself to his being able to integrate, and just contribute a little earlier than a lot of these other guys, but it's hard to imagine him making enough of an impact, even just statistically, to really be in that conversation. But he's going to be a fun one to keep an eye on, though, and I think that was a phenomenal pick for them at number 9. No doubt about that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the Malcolm Brogdon path, as Jacob pointed out, that is Denny's path to winning the award, and the people voting for the award have gone the way more in recent memory of actually going the basketball route in terms of making that choice and who contributed more to winning and whose play ultimately lended itself to team success rather than just putting up raw numbers. Obviously, there are going to be guys in this class that will put up better raw numbers than Denny. But we're going to see where the voting lies, how much Denny's play can actually affect winning, and if he's on the court for as many minutes, especially getting into like the second half of the year, as I think he'll be. So I wouldn't pick him to win Rookie of the Year. I just think that he should definitely have better odds than 24-1. I think a player with his upside and fitting in the role that I can see him in with this Washington team that's definitely going to be vying for a playoff spot and probably outperforming expectations in a sense. I just think he needs to be shown a little more respect than 24-1. But that's just my opinion. But I think that everybody, at least, is in some kind of agreement that while we're not picking him to win it, I think his odds should probably be a little better than they are. Part 2 with the Western Conference is going to be coming out next week. So definitely keep an eye on your feeds, everyone. Again, thank you so much for listening and supporting the podcast. As always, find all of our great content on social media. Subscribe. Twitter @DraftDeeper, like the Facebook page, do it all. We appreciate any support. Take care, everyone.